All right, let me ask you a question. What was the real cost of the last front desk, MA, physician, et cetera, who quit in your office? Obviously, we all know it's not just the cost of marketing or hiring a new person, but it's the weeks or months of covering for somebody else's duty, or those things not happening and getting done correctly, or patients not being seen.
Welcome to NatRevMD, a podcast where we share tips on optimizing medical billing and improving practice efficiency so you can have the business of your dreams. I'm your host, Dr. Heather Signorelli, founder of NatRevMD. Let's get started.
Today, we're going to talk all about hiring for attitude, hiring tips that allow people to stick in the job, and things that we've done in our own company, as well as things that I've experienced in my life in corporate healthcare. Author of a book called Hiring for Attitude shows that 89% of hiring failures are actually due to issues with attitude or culture fit, and not an actual issue with a lack of skill, right? A lot of the things that we're hiring people to do can be taught, can be checklist, et cetera, but it's the culture fit or the attitude fit that causes kind of the demise or loss of those staff members. So today, we're going to talk about some strategies when you're hiring folks, keeping folks, all the things to help stabilize in this economy where it feels like it's harder and harder to identify people that are going to come to work every day, excited to be there. And we're even having this problem again in the hospitals, right? Our phlebotomy staff especially are struggle. We see a lot of that turnover. And so how do we really truly identify the right people? And so that is going to be our strategy for today. All right, so let's talk about the first strategy that I think is really heavily overlooked, and things that are done well, I think, in corporations where they put a focus to this. I think it's easy to say, okay, I've got a gap. I'm going to put a job on Indeed, and I'm going to, run through all the resumes, see who has the right experience. But then there's not really a great mechanism for hiring for attitude or culture fit. And so I think the strategy here is to not overlook this, right? Hiring for attitude and training for skill can actually be very doable in many of the front desk, MA, many different roles that you have. Obviously, if you're hiring for a physician, they need to have a medical degree. But for the most part, I think we overlook the ability to have the right attitude in selecting somebody. We all know that you can teach a friendly, motivated person how to use your phone system, your EHR, what tasks they need to do, but it's very hard to teach somebody who's maybe technically very skilled, but is a cynical person, very negative, how to be empathetic and a good team player. And so your hiring process really should be focused on identifying the key attitudes or culture fit that you need in order for this person to be good, and then have a really solid training program to catch anybody up if they don't know the EHR, if they don't know your subspecialty, but they've worked in that type of room or type of practice before. I think we've got to start thinking about the technical skills as the only part of the hiring process, and instead start using behavioral questions that reveal candidates' true nature. So, for example, tell me about a time you had to deal with a frustrated or angry patient. What was the situation and how did you handle it? Another example is describe a time that you made a mistake at work. What was it? And then did you do to correct it? Or how did you respond to feedback about that? Again, you're looking for that humble approach, right? That they can admit that they made a mistake, that they respected the person who caught the mistake, and that they addressed it. And that's not this negative or defensive response. I think making sure that they can come up. We all know that we've all made mistakes. I think, a red flag is somebody who doesn't actually admit that they've ever made a mistake, or they've never had an experience around that. A good question is, so this is a repetitive job. What do you do to stay motivated on a slow day? Again, is you're trying to search for, are they going to identify extra things that need to be done so that they're pitching in on maybe somebody else's to-do list that's beyond their max capacity. There are some great books that are out there. Top Grading is one of them. No Ego is another really good book. Again, all of these, you could probably even, if you don't have time to read, do a ChatGPT or AI summary and come out with, what are the things that we can do to apply, and then get some interview questions from those strategies, similar to the ones I just mentioned, to help you kind of dive into some of those needs. I think another thing to do is to really understand, okay, what are the soft culture things that you need this individual to be good at, right? Do they need to be independent? Do they need to be hardworking? Do they need to be detail oriented? Do they need to be patient facing and empathetic? And so that you can get answers or identify skill sets around those soft skills to ask questions focusing on that versus, just the technical side of things. I think technical side is good in some positions, and it's certainly, you don't want to completely negate all of that, but then making sure that you're covering the soft skills, I think, is really important. The other thing is using a structured hiring process, not a gut feeling. And I'm really bad at this. And I've spent a lot of time really having to focus on what are those criteria that I absolutely need somebody to do. So there's a book called The A Method for Hiring by Jeff Smart and Randy Street, which outlines basically this 4-step process that has a really good way of identifying those A players. So again, the core idea here is to replace informal chit chats with this very structured, repeatable process for hiring. And so those 4 steps are having a scorecard. So before you even create a job description, create a scorecard that defines what success looks like. So what are the outcomes that this person must achieve? So for example, hiring a front desk, they must achieve 95% copay collection or maintain a wait time of less than X minutes. And then you actively seek out candidates and ask for employees for referrals. Obviously, you're looking for people with experience in other high-touch service industries. And then you use a series of structured interviews to basically do some quick screening and then a longer in-depth interview. And a key tip here is that quick screening call can be actually something that you can do async. So when I say async, I mean it's not a live call, especially if you have a small team. You can use what's called video ask, which we use on our own team to do some of those quick screening calls to see how did they show up? Did they get on camera? How were they dressed? Especially if this is like a patient-facing role. And then you can narrow it down and do a second, longer, in-depth interview. It just takes the amount of interviews that you have to do and boils it down. So, right, you get 150 applications and resumes. Maybe you do some screening questions that can be automated in Indeed, and then you can send them the link for the video questions. They answer those screening questions, and then you do a longer in-depth interview with 1 or 2 people. And then that can be focused on career history, past performance, and maybe some of those soft skills that we talked about. And obviously, if you do need that individual to involve other team members, you can do that after that. And then again, once you've found the right person, obviously you want to make sure that you are also sharing what this role looks like, that you're selling them on why your practice is great, but also what your culture and expectations are, and allowing them, even, depending on the role, an opportunity to come and shadow. Especially if you have a lot of first-year turnover, so employees who come to the position and then they quit within that first year, having the individual come and shadow in the role, and so that they can see what the office looks like and see what it feels, the good, the bad, the ugly, all the things. And you can even be upfront with them and share, what are some of the challenges that they may walk into and that we're working to improve and how they're going to be part of that process. But especially for front desk positions where you may be hiring somebody who's not spent a lot of time in that type of field or in that role before, that may just give them an idea of, are they in the right place, so that you don't hire somebody, train them, and then they leave within 6 months. All right, strategy number 3. So build a culture of retention from day one. So obviously, retention isn't something that you think about when someone is about to quit. It starts really on their first day. And it's really, really important that we recognize what those things are, right? So a May 2025 MGMA poll found that the top 2 drivers of front desk retention: higher pay, shocking, and engagement. And so you need a strategy around both. Obviously, pay is what pay is in terms of what you can afford, in terms of, being in line with kind of what other people are paying for this role in the market. But then engagement and training, I think, is something that we overlook, right? So what are the expectations that we have for this role? How are we going to help them be successful? What checklists or trainings can we do to get them aware of what their daily duties are, and then build upon that slowly? And so at first, it always starts with onboarding. And so you don't just show them the phone system. you have to have a structured onboarding plan. What are the tasks that they are going to be needing to take over? What is the time for them to take over? How much of that is they're going to be shadowing somebody versus they're going to be owning that? And have you assigned them a buddy or a mentor? How do you have regular check-ins with the right managers to make them feel part of the team, make them feel like they are doing a good job and that they have the resources to do a good job? Another thing that I think is hard is a career ladder. And the size of the practice is always going to matter on this, because staff invariably, just like all of us, want to have a career path. They want to have a way to increase income. They want to have a way to increase responsibility. And so you do want to be able to create a career ladder. And so even in a small practice, things like front desk 1, front desk 2, lead patient coordinator, tying patient or pay increases to these, adding new skills and responsibility can be part of that ladder. And again, it doesn't need to be these massive leaps, meaning you don't go from front desk to office manager in a lot of cases. In some cases, depending on the size of the practice, but you just want to make sure that, you have something to be able to share and offer with them. That just makes your practice more attractive. The other thing is huddles. Big fan of even just a brief 10-minute standing meeting every morning to review, schedule, celebrate some wins, right? Identify potential issues for the day, and then obviously identify those things that would be talked about in a larger weekly meeting or monthly meeting, depending on how urgent it is. So again, these things all build engagement. They all build a culture of, you want them to succeed. Granted, I know all of this takes time. And if you're a physician and you don't have a office manager, or you have an office manager, but she's dealing with, the nuances elsewhere, these things are kind of often the first to be let go. And I'm telling you, these things need to have the time carved out. Because again, it's just a cycle, right? So if you have more turnover, you're hiring more, you're having to put ads out, you're having to cover people's work. And so it impacts the practice long term. So highly recommend really kind of thinking through, what does hiring look like today in your practice? How do you onboard people? What's the culture you've set? And how do you continue to make these folks feel a part of the team and have increasing responsibility and career ladders? So to recap, strategies to find and keep great front desk staff, but could be applied to other roles, is really making sure that you're evaluating for attitude, even if you have to train for the skill, right? So you'll want to develop a structured hiring process. There's some great books that are out there. I mentioned a few today. Again, use AI for this. You do not have to create this from scratch. Use AI to come up with some good questions that you can ask. And again, utilizing that async technology to help decrease true live interviews, again, to weed out the people that weren't going to be the right fit anyway. And then working on building a culture of retention from day one, again, with appropriate onboarding and training and mentorship, career ladders, all of those things are all strategies that you can put into place. They're things that we've used in our own company. They are things that I use in my corporate world. So huge fan of being deliberate when it comes to building a team, which is a huge part of your practice's success. So here are your 3 steps for an action plan that you can evaluate. So obviously, looking at your job descriptions, take your current description for a front desk position and just evaluate and make sure that you have identified key things that you're looking for from an attitude perspective, and making sure that that's part of that job description and part of that interview process that you can evaluate. Having a scorecard, right? So before you hire that next person, create a one-pager that allows you to evaluate those important outcomes that you're asking these people to do, and that you're hiring against that scorecard, not just a resume or a gut feeling. And that if you have staff who maybe have been there, don't wait for someone to quit to find out that they're unhappy. I think making sure that you have some mechanism to get feedback about what do they like about their job, what do they not like about their job. Are they or have they been considering leaving? If so, why or why not? Just to help with retention plans in general. So obviously, hopefully these help for your office. If you are a medical practice that's looking for a new billing team, you can head on over to our website, natrevmd.com. Check us out. For practices that qualify, we have a free metric review top right-hand corner of our website, and you can schedule a review. All right. Thank you so much. Hopefully you guys have a great week.